Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of Real Life, Real Talk, the podcast, where we talk about real life, current events with real people. No fake news here, folks. I am Deanna McFarlane, and I am your host. For this very first episode of the podcast, I am riding solo. But for the future of this podcast, I intend on bringing on guests to discuss various topics. Topics ranging from politics, social contagion, boomers, and how that's going to change our demographic moving forward. Really, Western civilization as a whole and the direction we are headed in. Now, I'll tell you a bit about myself. I am Canadian. I was born and raised in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I currently live on the suburbs of Calgary in a city called Airdrie. I am a mother of two. I have a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I have an incredible husband. And I'm also a local real estate agent. Now, you're probably wondering why I decided to start this podcast. Well, to be honest with you, I think we are in a crisis in this country. I think that the current events that are happening here in the country and around the world are absolutely terrifying. I am terrified to raise children, and I am terrified with the direction that we are headed in. I have been paying attention to current events for really my whole life. Forced to as a child, in the car listening to talk radio with my dad, and proudly as an adult, now that I do adult things like have a job and own a house and pay taxes and raise children. I've been paying attention to what's been happening in the world for quite some time. Now, I'm very passionate about this. I feel like my great grandfather fought for us to have the freedoms that we have in this country, and I feel like they're being swept away from us. Now, I had someone close to me tell me a couple years ago when I was upset about something that was going on. He asked me, "Has this directly affected you in your life? Has this directly impacted your life?" The answer to that question at the time was no, it hadn't. But now these issues are starting to creep into our everyday life. And now I feel like I need to talk about it. So this podcast is going to be a little bit of an outlet for me. I want to start by saying I live a very privileged life. I'm very aware of that. I'm lucky that I was born and raised in Canada, and I work hard for what I have, but I also have been given the opportunities to have what I have. So I want to address that from the get-go. I also want to say that if you feel like you have a topic that you'd like to discuss with me here on the podcast as my guest, I would love to have you. I'm very open and sympathetic to other people's opinions, and I feel like that's what makes Canada so great, is that we are very diverse, we are very dynamic society as a whole, and I think that everyone's opinions, everyone's beliefs, everyone's gender, religion matters, and I think that's what makes our country so great. But there is some pretty serious issues happening that I think we should discuss, which leads me into my very first topic on the podcast. Now, we're going to discuss foreign interference in Canada from the Chinese Communist regime. Foreign interference in Canada from the Chinese Communist regime. This is a very real thing. In late February, so just a couple weeks ago, a whistleblower from the Canadian Security Intelligence Agency reported to Global News and the Globe and Mail that there is strong evidence that the Chinese Communist regime had interfered in our last two elections. CSIS, which is the Canadian Intelligence Service, has a laundry list of reports of foreign interference, reports that the Chinese wanted the Liberals to form government in Canada. They invoked a covert operation that started in 2014 and continued through our last 2021 election. Now, to put this in context, I'm going to give you a little lesson on how our government is set up so that you understand the severity of this. We have a parliament, and in the House of Parliament, there is 338 seats. The Liberals currently have 157, the Conservatives have 115, the NDP have 25, and the Bloc have 15. Now, to win a seat in the House of Commons, you need to win your riding. There's ridings all over the country based on population. Now, if any candidate can run in a riding, and if they win their riding, they win a seat in the House of Commons. Now, the reason I say this is that there is significant amount of ridings in higher dense, like higher populated portions of the country. So the greater metro cities like Toronto and Vancouver. So if the GTA has a fair amount of ridings, and so much so that if you were to win majority of the GTA, the Toronto greater area, you're almost guaranteed to form government. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, China not only interfered in our elections, but they had Canadian accomplices, 11 candidates that they're aware of. Most of them liberal and most of them in the GTA area, and most of them aware of this. China provided them money, manpower, resources. They were even illegally reimbursing Canadian donors the difference that the Canadian tax credit wouldn't cover. They were also running and paying for social media smear campaigns, one campaign that actually worked. Mr. Kenny Chiu was among one of the targets, BC Conservative MP for Stevenson Richmond East, beginning in 2019 and lost the election in 2021 to Liberal candidate Parn Baines. Mr. Chiu was attacked during the campaign for proposing a public registry to track foreign influence. Now, many countries have these registries to track foreign influence in their countries such as the USA, England, and more. Mr. Chiu was born in Hong Kong and was accused on social media with a post suggesting that the registry was an effort to target all people of Chinese origins. This was not true. Shortly after Mr. Chiu lost the 2021 election, China's former consulate general in Vancouver, Ms. Tong, boasted about how she helped defeat 2 Conservative MPs. Aaron O'Toole, the old Conservative leader, stated that the smear campaign caused the Conservatives to lose at least 7 seats. This is direct interference in our Canadian election. China was even able to tilt a nominee in favor of Liberal MP Han Dong of Toronto's Don Valley. Now, there was countless reports of this given to the Prime Minister at the time. The Prime Minister's response, you ask? Our Honorable Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's response, quote, "It is not up to an unelected security agency to tell a political party who can and cannot run." Han Dong still currently sits in the House of Commons today. Now, as I said earlier, this started long before the 2021 election. 2014, CSIS reports that Chinese billionaire Zhang Bin, a political advisor to the government of Beijing and a senior official in China's network of state of promoters around the world, was to donate $1 million to the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation. And then the Chinese government would reimburse him in full. There was a conversation, this is still back in 2014, that between China and a Canadian domestic accomplice that they wish to see a majority Liberal government in the next election, as Stephen Harper's Conservatives don't align with China's wants and needs. Shortly after Justin Trudeau won the 2015 election, that same Chinese businessman, Mr. Zhang Bin, attended a Liberal Party fundraiser at the Toronto home of Benson Wong, where Justin Trudeau was the guest of honor. Okay, so this is all very alarming. If you're Canadian and you care about your democratic right and the democracy we have in this country, this is absolutely terrifying. This is a direct attack on our democracy. Now, all of this and more has been leaked. Leaders of the opposition party are calling for a public inquiry. All the leaders. Pierre Poilievre for the Conservatives, Jasmeet Singh for the NDP, and Francisco Blanchet, the leader of the Bloc. You would think that if Justin Trudeau and his Liberals had nothing to hide, they would want to get to the bottom of this immediately. After all, their job is to protect Canadians. They're doing just the opposite. They're doing everything in their power to prevent a public inquiry. They're doing everything to prevent Justin Trudeau's chief of staff, Katie Telford, from testifying that she knew nothing about the countless reports coming from CSIS and the memos from the Privy Council. The Privy Council is essentially an ethics board for the government of Canada. That she knew nothing about these reports given to the Prime Minister's office. Now, instead, Justin Trudeau has assigned the former Governor General David Johnston to oversee the investigation of Chinese government interference in Canadian elections. Justin Trudeau announced Wednesday that the role of a special rapporteur to review the findings of Beijing's interference activities in the 2019 and 2021 election. Johnston is to only report to the Prime Minister's office, and the report will be subject to redacted information for the public eye. There is also no timeline on this report, so I'm sure he's hoping that it's just going to disappear and people will forget about it. But get this, David Johnston, the new rapporteur to lead this report, is the former CEO of the Trudeau Foundation. Can you scream conflict of interest? My goodness, is your mind blown yet? This is the Prime Minister of our great country, essentially being caught knowing and potentially helping China interfere with our elections and our democracy. I am just flabbergasted. I mean, I feel like Justin Trudeau is a cockroach. Nothing can take this guy down. This is not anything new for Justin Trudeau to be in the middle of a scandal. I mean, we can talk about SNC-Lavalin, where he was essentially paying his friends at SNC-Lavalin from Canadian taxpayers and then asked his Attorney General, Jody Wilson-Raybould, to lie for him and cover it up. On the topic of Jody Wilson-Raybould, if you haven't read her book, Indian in the Cabinet, I highly recommend you read that book or listen to the audiobook. It really paints a picture on the type of person our Prime Minister is. What he did to her and how he wanted her to lie for him and then essentially forced her to resign because she couldn't testify the truth due to cabinet security, or because she was in the cabinet, due to security or privacy. What he did to her was horrific. I admire her and her bravery and everything that she did to protect Canadians. And he is just, pardon my language, an arrogant asshole. So I highly recommend listening to the audiobook. You really feel her emotion. She is 100% telling the truth about what he did to her and what he did to the other, Jane Philpott in his caucus is absolutely terrible. Anyway, so he was caught in the SNC-Lavalin scandal. And then we can talk about the We Charity scandal, where he given a significant donation to the We Charity from Canadian taxpayers on the condition that the We Charity hire his family to speak at their events. I mean, his wife received a significant amount of money, I think close to $200,000. His mother then spoke and received another significant amount of money. I mean, the guy is involved in scandal after scandal after scandal. Now, I don't know if, if blackface, SNC-Lavalin, and the We Charity scandal didn't take Justin Trudeau down. I mean, are we really confident that him being involved and aware in foreign interference from China is going to take him down? And I don't really know. I mean, if you were to sit back and think about this, that we have MPs currently sitting in the House of Commons that was bought and paid for to get there by China. What do you think China is gaining in return for this? It's a very scary thought. I mean, China is a communist country. You know, it would affect who we trade with. It would affect other countries that we support. I mean, no wonder when the German counselor shows up to Canada asking for liquefied natural gas, Trudeau says, no, we're going in a different direction. It's because China called and said, don't do that. I mean, this directly affects everything that we have here in Canada. So I wanted to leave this topic as the first topic for this podcast, just to kind of set the tone in where we are sitting in Canada today. Next time on the podcast, I'm going to be discussing Bill C-18 and Bill C-11 and how the Trudeau Liberals are pushing through these two bills, which would directly affect everything we see online. They will essentially censor everything that we see, from our Instagram post, our Facebook post, to news clips on Google, to YouTube, Netflix. Everything under the sun that Canadians see online will be directly affected by these bills. Now, I hope you enjoyed this first episode of the podcast, and please like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Please tune in to the next one, and if you have a topic you'd like to discuss with me as a guest on the podcast, please reach out to me. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.